Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Facebook Live. This Wednesday, we have a very special session for Facebook Live. We are having a forum with three of our candidates for Lieutenant Governor who are running in the Democratic primary, which early voting is open now, and primary election day is May 24th. So I am going to jump right in. So we will have time to hear from our candidates, and we will be asking questions about public education because that's what our number one issue is as educators. So you will each have 3 minutes, and we will start with you, Representative Allen.
Well, thank you very much, Lisa, for having me, and thank you, GAE members. I can't start off without saying happy Teacher Appreciation Week. Thank you for all that you do for our students and our scholars all over the state of Georgia. So I'm Eric Allen. I'm currently the representative for Georgia's 40th district, which is primarily in Cobb County, but also has a little bit of Fulton. I sit as the chair of the Cobb legislative delegation, and really just enjoy the work that we've been doing together. I know this has been an extremely brutal year for education. We've had quite a few bills that I know and my colleagues and Renita's on as well have really spent a lot of time fighting and being on the defensive. And I look forward to an opportunity where we can be on the offensive. Instead of using my time to talk a little bit more about me, I want to talk about my mother, and it will help you understand why teachers are so important to me. But my mother is a retired teacher, taught 31 years in the same school. Before she retired, almost got to the point where she taught 3 generations. And I can remember that the impact she had on my friends that went through her school, her class. One of the things that's most memorable is, and always shapes how I view teachers, is when I was in the seventh or 8th grade. I remember coming home and a teacher, my mother was sitting there reading a letter, and it was from a student. And it was from a student who had been expelled from her class in his 6th grade year, but was going on to get his PhD and was nominating her for the most influential person in his life. That's the impact teachers have. That's what teachers offer to young people all over the state, all over the country. And so I'm just excited to be here today to have this conversation with you, but I appreciate all of the work that you do, and I will always be in your corner. So thank you very much for having us.
Thank you, Representative Allen. And next, I will turn to Representative Renita Shannon for her opening statement.
Well, thank you so much, GAE, for having us here tonight. I'm excited to be here with you. I'd like to also say I appreciate everything that educators do for us. And I know that it may feel right now like elected officials do not appreciate educators, but there are some of us who do. And I have been fighting for you in the legislature. I am State Representative Renita Shannon. I've been serving in the Georgia House of Representatives for the last 6 years. I was raised by 2 hardworking parents. My mom was a nurse and my dad was a pastor and a community organizer before they had a fancy word for what he was doing. He was always attending meetings with the SELC, the NAACP, and organizing around issues that matter to working families. Before I was elected, I was a successful business executive and also a community organizer working on the issues that matter to working families. So you see where I get it from. During the time I have been in the State House, these are the things that I have focused on. I have fought for workers to be paid a livable wage because we know that workers are the majority in this state, and it's long past time that policy actually reflected that. I have fought to protect voting rights. I am the only person in this race who has had the experience of having to directly stand up to the Trump lawyers to protect the rights of Georgians. In 2020, they came before my Committee on Governmental Affairs and tried to convince us to throw out the votes of Georgians and give the state to Trump for presidential electors. And I stood up to the lawyers. I have also worked to end mass incarceration in the state. We are putting people on probation and enrolling them in the criminal legal system for absolutely no reason. Sometimes it's over the inability to pay a speeding ticket. Last but not least, I fought to expand healthcare. I'm the only person in this race that can say that they have led a successful effort to get Georgia to expand Medicaid. Starting in 2019, I led the successful effort to expand postpartum Medicaid, which was something that we really needed to do, because we know that our maternal mortality rate has been abysmal in the state. And Black women were 3 to 4 times more likely to die just trying to give birth. And so I have really focused on the work while being in the state house. And now I'm running for lieutenant governor because regressive policies have shaped harsh reality for far too many Georgians. And a lot of those Georgians are teachers. And we need a lieutenant governor who is going to fight for our collective future. I'm that person, Renita Shannon, running for lieutenant governor.
Thank you, Representative Shannon. And now I want Dr. Hayes for your opening statement.
Hello. My name is Dr. Jason Hayes, Democratic candidate for Lieutenant Governor. First off, just like Representative Allen, I want to wish you a happy Teachers Appreciation Week. And a quick background on myself, I'm originally from Louisiana, where the seeds of public service were planted into me. Both my paternal grandparents were school teachers. My paternal grandmother actually taught 40 years in the St. Andrew Parish school system. My paternal grandfather, World War II vet, Master Drill Sergeant. When he retired from service, he ended up teaching as well. Also, my father is a Navy vet, mother is a retired nurse. So public service is something that I was born into. I also had some experience as a boys state representative in high school, and that's where my political aspirations were born from. So essentially medical doctor, master's in public health, executive master's in business, have done work as a congressional intern, and also have done work on the state level. I've worked in underserved communities with the National Health Service Corps, and also was an interim medical director as well. Ran for office in 2020, almost flipped a Republican red district, which is House District 49, got 47.2% of the vote as a first-time candidate. Showed that I was well liked by Democrats and respected by Republicans. So running for Lieutenant Governor of the state of Georgia for 4 reasons. One, as a medical doctor, I'm concerned that we're ranked 43rd in healthcare. Also, maternal mortality, we're second to last in the United States in maternal mortality. So not only do we need Medicaid expansion, but we also need those funds to help keep hospitals open, but also the key component is making sure that we get doctors in the community. And I would love to use the National Health Service Corps as such. 2, economic growth. We must make sure that there's growth in all communities, especially disadvantaged communities and rural communities. That includes focusing on small business ownership and also leveraging relationships with corporations so they can focus on community job hiring and training. 3, protecting the right to vote. This campaign has partnered up with an organization called Ride Share to Vote. So we're helping elders and people who are wheelchair bound access to the polls. And finally, education. Without it, I wouldn't be here. We'd love for teachers to get better pay, better support in the classroom. And also we need education that is the political leaders on having a more progressive curriculum where young people can get trade skill opportunities and learn about finance. Please learn about me, Dr. Jason Hayes, www.jasonhayes4forga.com. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Hayes. And now Charlie Bailey is here with us as well. Charlie.
Thank you, Lisa, and apologies for being a couple minutes late on the road campaigning. But my name is Charlie Bailey, and I am running to be Lieutenant Governor of the great state of Georgia. I'm running for Lieutenant Governor because every day the vast majority of Georgians, they get up, they go to work, and they're worried about, is my kid safe? How are they doing in school? If I get a hospital bill, can I pay it? And instead of working on those issues that are closest to the hearts and the lives of the people of Georgia, our main 2 Republican opponents in this race are in a competition over who can be the biggest authoritarian. You got one of them, Burt Jones, who was a false elector for Donald Trump, tried to overturn the election. Another, Butch Miller, who about 2 months ago, maybe a month and a half ago, brought Marjorie Taylor Greene to the floor of the state Senate. Theirs is a politics of hate and division, a politics that says not everybody's vote does matter the same, not everybody's child matters the same, not everybody's school matters the same, not everybody's community matters the same. But I'll tell you what I believe. I believe we are all human beings, that we all love our families, that we all deserve the same dignity, the same safety, the same justice, the same opportunity to build for our families a better life than the one that we had. And it's those values that have driven my career, whether that was as an attorney under Governor Roy Barnes at the Barnes Law Group, whether that was as a senior assistant district attorney in Fulton County, working on organized crime and gangs, or back in private practice now, a firm, Cook and Conley, that was founded by Bobby Lee Cook, a man that represented labor unions in the 50s before anybody would. Whether it was as the Democratic nominee for Attorney General 4 years ago, when I got 49% of the vote, the highest vote share of any down ballot statewide Democrat. It's those values that have driven my career and drive this campaign. And so I did grow up in the church. So what I learned is that words without deeds, well, they are dead. So these are some of the words, some of the values I hold, but what are the deeds we're going to work on? Number one, Medicaid expansion. We're going to expand Medicaid to cover the over 600,000 Georgians that don't have health care coverage right now. Number two, on education. Y'all have heard me say this before, those who are in the interview. I think we need to be paying our teachers $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 a year. I think we need to pay them like the professionals they are. And I think we need to hire a lot more of them so that we can reduce class sizes. Look forward to talking about these issues further, and I look forward to earning your vote in this race. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have 4 questions for each of the candidates, and I, as the teacher I am, have my plan already. So we're going to rotate who answers which question first, so you'll all get a turn. But our first question, if elected, how will your role as Lieutenant Governor impact public education, and why? And we're going to start once again with Representative Allen.
Well, you caught me off guard, Lisa. I thought you were going to switch up somebody else to go first. You said it, it threw me off. But no, that's a great question. And, you know, a lot of candidates may talk about what they would do. I'll answer by saying I'll continue to do what I've been doing when it comes to public education. I will make sure that we are fighting every single attempt to shift public funds to private institutions. I think every year we've had voucher bills that we have been fighting because it is a pet project of our colleagues in the Republican Party to make sure that they shift as much of the resources away from our public schools that need it the most. So that's one thing. Also, just on a personal level, I'd like to really address the evaluation process that I think our teachers are under right now. I think that's been a point of contention for some time. And I think that's one thing as Lieutenant Governor I'd like to do is bring people, the right stakeholders to the table to have the conversation of how do we not only evaluate our teachers' performance, but how do we pay them? I know the governor has given raises over the last couple of years, mostly just to fulfill a campaign promise, but I think that's an issue that's very important. And over the last couple of years, we've now, especially this past year, seen a lot of culture politics coming into our schools. And we need to make sure that we're not using our students and their future and the curricula as an opportunity to score cheap political points. That is one of the most egregious things. And we've got to reshift the tone in the Senate and in the House to make sure that we're doing everything we can to put students first, put teachers first, and make sure that we're not using fake boogeyman like parents' Bill of Rights when we already know that parents and teachers have the relationships that they need to be able to do what's best for our kids.
Thank you. Representative Shannon.
Yes, so there are quite a few things that I would do, and that I would fight for things that I have continued to fight for while I've been in the House. Number one, I would make sure that we pay teachers like we actually appreciate them and pay them in a way that makes this a lucrative career. For me, I'm thinking that is probably around a $70,000 or $80,000 salary. The other thing I would do is we need to revamp our QBE formula. Teachers cannot be successful if they don't have the resources that they need in order to make sure students get a quality education. So we need to revamp our QBE formula, and that needs to include wraparound services so that kids are not showing up to school and they haven't had food to eat and they need dental work. And because of that, they can't think about what teachers are trying to teach them. I would also make sure that we take teachers out of politics. Teachers are getting hammered right now because the Republican Party is looking for a new way to coalesce their voters. In the 80s, it was abortion. Now it has turned into attacking teachers, and that is just not where we need to be. Last but not least, I would set up a board that would allow teachers, it would be a combination of educators on this board, and they would be able to score every single piece of legislation that comes through the General Assembly for its impact on the classroom. Because the General Assembly spends so much time making rules around education, and we have very little educators actually elected. And so most of us are making policy and we've never even had the experience of being a teacher. So I would work to make sure that educators are front and center every single time that we talk about education, and that we are prioritizing what legislators want for education as we move legislation through the General Assembly.
Thank you. Dr. Hayes?
Yes, excellent question. One of the first things I would do is that actually I would commission a committee to be with educators. It is far too often you are being told what needs to be done for you and your students or your schools, but we need to turn the tables on this and have a fresh set of eyes on the current process. We need educators telling the politicals what you need so you can be effective at doing your job and making sure that the future of our generation has what it needs to become the best who they are. I can tell you that I think that you need better pay. I also feel like you need better classroom support. You need clinical social workers to help young students who may be dealing with domestic issues at home. We also need to make sure that there's health care for young students when they're coming in. Also, we need to make sure that the curriculum is progressive for young people, learning about critical race theory, learning about trade skill opportunities, finance and small business ownership. So whenever they are graduating, they have their skills and opportunities there. But at the end of the day, the first thing I would do, and I've even said this for my campaign when I started off as a lieutenant governor, is have a committee with educators. So you tell us what you need so you can be successful and so our students can be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Charlie Bailey.
Yeah, so I'm gonna talk about, I guess, kind of three things. One, I've already mentioned, but I do believe that we ought to pay teachers like the professionals that they are. I do believe that is at least, we're not gonna be able to do this in one session, but 70, 80, 90,000, I think that's where we need to get to. And that'll also help as we are trying to hire more teachers, to reduce class sizes. I'm not an expert on education, but I've read experts on education. I've listened to experts on education, and just about everyone says you get a good teacher with a small class, that's the best shot those kids have at achieving, in that educational system. So that's going to take more than just words from Republicans that like to talk about valuing educators and some actual deeds and getting it done. So that's number one. Number two, this, and it's been touched on, but this idea, anybody who's been a teacher, and y'all could tell us, the more parental involvement in a school, the better. That makes schools better. So I'm for parental involvement in education in the classroom. What I'm not for is politicians telling teachers what they're supposed to be teaching. And I'll say specifically, I heard someone, say the other day that, they don't want kids to be uncomfortable, learning about history. They don't want concepts that make them uncomfortable. Well, when people are hearing about learning about, my kids, if I'm lucky enough to have them, or learn about slavery and the Holocaust, dang right, I want them to be uncomfortable. They need to be uncomfortable. Those are two of the greatest sins of mankind. And so that's part of teaching history. So we need to get politicians out of the classroom. The last thing is I'm going to fight to make technical school tuition free again in the state of Georgia.
Okay. Thank you all. Our next question. Our goal as educators is for our students to graduate college and career ready. How would you support this goal? And we are going to start with you, Mr. Bailey.
Can you repeat it one more time, Lisa? I'm sorry.
Okay, that's fine. Our goal as educators is for our students to graduate college and career ready. How would you support this goal?
Well, I think it starts in some of the things that we've covered. you have to be willing to invest the resources to have enough teachers, to have social workers there at schools, to provide kids a full, panoply of resources they need, and to determine, whether they're going to be college ready, or I would say, technical school ready, apprenticeship ready. Most of that has to do with funding. I mean, it's not all, but a lot of it has to do, with having ample funding. And we have an antiquated formula, QBE formula that was formed in the mid 80s that needs to be updated, as Representative Shannon said. And we've got to invest in our K through 12 education, like we say that we care about our kids. And the General Assembly under Republican leadership, not Democratic leadership, under Republican leadership, gives far too many special interest tax breaks to their buddies or whoever can hire the best lobbyists, and doesn't put the money into our schools to make them palaces of learning for our kids, so our professionals, our teachers, can get the job done. So I think I want to hear from what y'all have to say, but I think from what I can see, you need a lot more funding, a lot more investment from the state, so every school can provide all those opportunities, from college, technical school, to apprenticeships for our kids.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hayes.
Yes, excellent question. Mentioned before, the commission committee, I want to give you a blank canvas. I want you to dictate what type of curriculum that you need your students to have in order to become successful. For example, those that want to go into the sciences, the science, technology, engineering, and math, we need to have that track for them. We need to make them science ready, help them with test taking skills, but also teaching them the ability to actually learn the material. And then also the other students who may not want to go to college. We have to bring technical trade skill opportunities back to high school. And both tracks of students, we have to put them in a position to learn about emotional intelligence, to learn about finance. Also, we must make sure that small business ownership is taught as well, doing business plans so that individuals can actually learn. So again, at the end of the day, we need more funding as well, but I want to give you the blank canvas so you can tell us what you need so we can help the students become the best that they can be. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. Representative Shannon.
Yes, thank you for the question. This is all about investing in public education. Investing in public education was one of the issues that I ran on initially in 2017. The Democrat that I unseated was allowing money to go out to for private voucher programs and things like that. And so this really is about funding. It is not something that has to take a decade to get done or even 5 years to get done. What I know is that today Republicans pay for every single thing else they want in the budget. But when it comes to education, we're constantly just told, well, we're spending 51% of the budget on education. That's all we can spend. And it's just not true. It is about priorities. We also need to make sure that public education, again, has the funding in order to be able to modernize the curriculum of what they're teaching. There are plenty of careers that we see private schools teaching where folks can come out of high school and they already are career ready. For example, coding. If they can teach it, there's no reason that public schools cannot teach it. And all of that comes back to, again, investing in public education, truly understanding the cost of what it takes to make sure each student gets a quality basic education. And that is revamping our QBE formula. So it does come back to investing in public education.
And Representative Allen.
Find that mute button. So, like my colleagues have said, this is about funding, but it's not just about the buzzwords of QBE and that we need more money. It's where that money goes. Right now, we need to really invest more, especially more in certain rural parts of the state, in the career academies. Really getting the CTAE programs up and running in places where they're not, and kind of expanding those. We got to meet kids where they are. I think the essence of your question was, how do you make them college ready and career ready? There are some kids who best path to being productive citizens is not necessarily college. And we have a good model with the career academies. We can get them skills where they're walking out of high school ready to take on jobs today. We need to be partnering more with our business community to get more offerings, but also make that a level playing field. When we talk about, QBE, one of the most outdated components is the fair share model. The whole purpose of fair share was to make sure we spread that money across the state, so where people would have equal access to the same things they have in Metro Atlanta, in Bainbridge and in Blue Ridge. So we got to make sure that we're not only addressing saying we need more money, we need to make sure we're allocating that money in the right places so it's effective in getting our students career ready or college ready, as you stated.
Thank you. Our next question is an issue that is across our state, and that is there is currently a lack of educators. There is a shortage of not only teachers, but also those support personnel that work in our schools, bus drivers in particular. So how would you support recruitment and retention of educators and education employees? And we're going to start with you, Representative Shannon.
Thank you for the question. So again, this is about investing in teacher pay. We cannot continue to ask teachers to come to school and be babysitters, take care of kids who have not had food to eat, take care of medical issues for students. We are asking teachers to do way too much. And what that does is that takes away from teachers' main responsibility, which is to provide a quality basic education. And so we have got to, number one, invest in teacher pay and make sure that teachers are not having to pay for resources that they need in the classroom out of their pockets, because that's what's happening today. We need to make sure that we get the wraparound services, as I mentioned before, so that kids are showing up and they are ready to go and ready to learn. The other thing that we need to do is make sure that all of the resources that students need and that teachers need are ready to go. I remember during the pandemic, a lot of kids were sent home to do virtual learning, and lots of kids in my district did not have access to broadband because they could not afford broadband. These are all the things that we need to take a holistic view of to make sure that we are making sure that students are taken care of, and that in turn is going to make sure that teachers are taken care of.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey.
I think you're going to get a lot of agreement on this one again. It's not all about money, but it is mostly about money. I mean, there are we have an amazing population of teachers in our state. They are not paid. They are not paid what they deserve, and we can keep going and asking teachers to sacrifice more and more and more, and support personnel, bus drivers and the other people that make the schools work. We can go that way, and we can go the way of having, graduation rates and other measures of education that are not what we want for our kids and our community. Or we can say, we value education. We value those that teach our kids. I mean, the most impactful thing in a child's life is the home that they live in. The second most impactful thing is the education that they receive. So if we want to give our kids the best shot, we got to give them the best education, and we have to invest in it like we actually say we care about it. And it's like Representative Shannon said, like, the money is there. We have the money to do this, and it just takes the will to do it. So that's it. I mean, put your money where your mouth is. And I don't think with any of us are going to have a problem with that. We end up being, one of us ends up being lieutenant governor, but that's what I believe. You got to invest in it like you actually care about it.
Thank you, Dr. Hayes.
I remember as an 8-year-old, my grandmother, who's at the time about to retire from education, said that it's not the same anymore. And she meant her profession. School teachers were constantly being devalued over the course of decades. And now it's gotten to the point where people who want to teach, love to teach, are leaving the profession because of lack of support, poor pay. We need to make sure that we do raise the pay of school teachers, but we also must give them support in the classroom, teacher assistants, the clinical social workers to help with the students who may have mental health concerns. We must make sure that students are getting the appropriate nutrition and attention that they need, because let's face it, you are doing a lot. We've got to make the packages attractive to recruit and retain teachers, even looking at have retention bonuses. Also, the other thing that's important to mention is that the other candidates mentioned this too about the QBE formula. And I do agree that the local fair share part about the formula is difficult. But in order to fix all of this, we've got to focus on economic growth in communities, because there are many teachers that want to go to underserved communities and rural communities. But because they're dealing with a lot of the social issues and poor pay, they're walking away from that. So we can't just focus on education in the silo itself. We also have to look at social determinants of health, socioeconomic status in communities, and improve that as well. But at the end of the day, I want teachers to do what they came to do, is the love and to retain that love for teaching young students. And that'll be my job as Lieutenant Governor. And I must convey this message to all Republicans and Democrats alike. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question.
Oh, do I get that one?
You got one.
I'm sorry. Did I skip you, Representative Allen?
You did. That's okay. Unless you're going to give me a unique question all of my own, so I don't have to sound like my colleagues. Because
I'm sorry. No, go ahead and answer that one.
Same song, different verse.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, you're fine. The only thing I'll add, and I'll be brief because I think everybody has summed it up well. But in Georgia, we don't really have a problem with revenue. The term of economic development was brought in. It's not about that. Over the last two budgets, I've sat there, and Renita's been in the room with us as well. Is we have given back $1 billion a year in the supplemental this year and last year. This has nothing to do with having the money. This has the political will to not attack our teachers, but pay them what they need. When I went to the well against HB 1084, one of the things I've talked about is that these bills, 1178, 1084, those are things that hurt us in recruiting teachers. When teachers see what we're doing in Georgia and how we're not supporting them, that becomes an issue as well. So it's not just the money, it's also how we treat and what signals we send to how we want to respect our teachers. The other piece with pay, and Representative Shannon hit on it, and I want to just emphasize, teachers are spending so much of their own money to make ends meet in their classroom. It doesn't matter if we're giving them a raise. The biggest raise we can give them now is to fund the classroom so that they don't have to dip in their own pocket, to make sure that their students not only have the materials, but they're helping buy clothes. They're buying meals. The wraparound services that we're talking about, there are so many things that a teacher is trying to do to our students before they can even get them learning ready. And we got to show that we're supporting them that way as well, not just in raises.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, and a couple of you've mentioned this before, but if you want to expound on your answer, public education issues have become highly divisive, especially around subjects such as masks to prevent COVID, teaching the history of race and racism, and choices of instructional materials. How would you resolve this problem? And we're going to start with Dr. Hayes.
So again, I did mention before about making sure we commission committees to have educators in the room as the stakeholders to make sure they're educating or teaching the political leaders what needs to be done. We have got to just come with a consensus with all of this, is that, parents want certain things censored with their children. We'll take them out of public school and put them in private school or homeschool. Simple as that. We can't sit up here and have a minority of people who may have a certain level of income or socioeconomic status to dictate what's being taught to all the students across the state of Georgia. If you don't like what's being taught in the public school, take your kids out, put them in private school or homeschool. As simple as that. We cannot continue to have teachers with their hands behind their back, especially social studies, civics, if they're not able to teach the truth. History is important. Without history, we're doomed to repeat it because we have to learn about social behaviors. So at the end of the day, we have to empower teachers to do their job, allow teachers to dictate best practices for the curriculum and what needs to be taught. And the last thing is that, when we just kind of add on to some other things. Anytime we're dealing with anything with monies, education, healthcare is always going to be about the money. When you rob from Peter, you're trying to pay Paul. We can't do that. So revenue, economic growth is always going to be a factor in healthcare, education. So funding is there, the budget is there, but if you're cutting one thing, you're robbing Peter to try to pay Paul. So money is always going to be an issue, and fiscal responsibility will be too. Need a fresh set of eyes on what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Allen.
Yeah, so I would sum it by saying that we, the one constitutional responsibility the legislature has is to pass a budget. When it comes to education, that should be where we stop. This is, we like to scream local control under the gold dome, and so we want to control the locals. And our school boards and administrators in our various counties and independent school districts are more than capable of making local decisions about the curricula, the things that are taught in their classrooms. If we need oversight, there is oversight with the State Board of Education, the state superintendent. I think we are allowing way too much politics to come into the conversation around our schools. This past session, we've talked about all the bad things that what I consider bad that we had to deal with. I think that it was a election year distraction. We were more focused on things that would be on bumper stickers or would look good on mailers than we were about what we really wanted to do to improve the classrooms for our kids. So I think the question of how do we remove those politics is to focus on just passing a budget. And I would be fine if the General Assembly took a position of no longer getting engaged in curriculum. That's just not, as Renita or Representative Shannon, I got to quit calling you Renita, but as Representative Shannon said earlier, there are very few, if any, educators that are in the General Assembly, and those that are there are very few and far between. So we really should be leaning on our professionals to make those decisions and not trying to make it a political point or score political points with a child's education.
Mr. Bailey.
What we've seen from these Republicans in trying to, substitute a politician's judgment for what history is, substitute a politician's judgment for what is a good enough book for a child to read or to be in a library. This is authoritarianism. That's what it is. This is what they do in Russia. You control information, you change history, all to fit, a political aim that you have. That's what they're doing. It's not normal. It's extreme. It's radical, and we need to call it that. And then we need to push back on it. We've got some cleaning up to do. And I plan on being the lieutenant governor. We got some cleaning up to do for the damage that's been done by these politicians. So I'm absolutely against, as I've said, politicians dictating what history is. I think scholars and historians and educators need to determine, as Eric was just talking about, what history is, and librarians that have been trained in literature, teachers need to determine what books children are reading. So this is part of the entire authoritarian movement in the Republican Party. We got to call it what it is. It's the same thing that says somebody's vote doesn't matter as much as somebody else's. It's the same thing that says if I lose an election, I didn't really lose it because the people that voted for me matter more. It's a part of the same thing, and I will push back with every bit of power and voice I have against it for as long as I can.
Thank you. Representative Shannon.
Yes, so I'm going to say this before I even start. I understand that GAE is nonpartisan, but I got to call it like I see it. The Republicans are advancing a bunch of nonsense. They are talking and working on things that don't need to be worked on. We need to have the accurate teaching of history. Race in this country has become almost a national security issue. And I say that because other countries are able to use our history on race in order to continue to cause conflict within the country. And it's because we continue to avoid dealing with race. The books and the curriculum that teachers were using, there's been nothing wrong with any of that curriculum. Teachers should not be made to feel like they are being pitted against parents. The truth of the matter is parents have always had input into the curriculum that their kids would be taught. They've always had that. So again, you just have Republicans making up a fake culture war that does not exist. And unfortunately, they are putting teachers at the center at a time when teachers are underpaid, overworked, and having to pay for things out of their pockets. I mean, it is a wonder that teachers continue to show up to even teach in the classroom. And I, for one, am very thankful every single day that an educator walks into the classroom, because we are de-incentivizing teachers to do so. So if I were Lieutenant Governor, I would make sure that we are taking teachers out of politics, but that we are bringing them in to help us make decisions that are going to make education better in the state of Georgia.
Thank you. And we are doing so well on time tonight that we're going to have a bonus question. Yay! Because we do have time. And so the bonus question is, do you support the current system that allows charter school systems and strategic waiver systems to opt out to waive almost any state law or board rule? And as you answer that specifically, would you support legislation that ends the ability of school systems to exempt themselves from state class size maximums? And we're going to start with Representative Shannon.
Yes, thank you for the question. I've had a lot of personal experience with this. I mean, your question, so obviously I would not support any of that. As I mentioned, I ran on fully funding public education to get elected. The ways that charter and private schools are able to opt out of things that public schools actually have to do and comply with is how you know that these are not actually public schools. I know that people like to say that charter schools and private schools are public schools, but they are not, because public schools have to adhere to certain requirements and they are not able to just opt out of certain requirements. And there are certain protections that you have in public schools that students do not have in charter-based schools. Now, I'm speaking from personal experience because I went to a combination of charter schools and public schools growing up. And I can tell you this, no school is better than another. What it comes down to is funding. I got a great education in public schools and I got a great education in the charter schools. And the reason that happened is because both of the types of schools were well funded. The high school I went to in Florida was a high school that was built by the founder of Publix. My school had a lot of money. So what it comes down to is any school can be great if it has the resources necessary in order to provide quality basic education. And we just need to get serious about really supporting public schools like we mean it.
Thank you. Dr. Hayes.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely will be against any legislation or law that allows charter schools or any type of schools to basically operate on their own. At the end of the day, we have to have standardization. And I learned that in business school, that if you don't have standardization among the education school systems, whether they're public, private, or any kind of charter school, then you won't have a way to grade or at least evaluate your school systems and, more importantly, your children. So we have to make sure that there's standardization and at least at the minimum core requirements for all of the schools to follow. So definitely I'll be against these waiver programs that these charter schools have been trying to use.
Okay. Mr. Bailey.
Yes, I would support ending these special waiver systems, particularly when we're talking about class sizes. You know, the idea that, I mean, if a small class with a good teacher is good for a kid, it's good for a kid, whether they're in a public school or charter school or anywhere else. So, you know, it does no good to put in the funding to reduce class sizes if we're going to let people violate that rule. So We need to bring down our class sizes. We need to have a maximum that is much lower than it is right now, and that needs to apply across the board, including charter schools. And of course, there are charter schools that provide, a good education. They just need to follow the rules to make sure our kids are taken care of.
Okay. And Representative Allen.
Yeah, I just like everybody else, I do not support the current system. And I tell you, one of the things I feel is not talked about enough in our current system is the fact that some of the charter schools don't have to adhere not just to class sizes, but some of the holistic problems that our public schools have to deal with. And what I mean by that is when a student is struggling academically or a behavioral problem, these charter schools will purge them and kick them out and put them back in our public school. And so I'm not impressed when you're bragging about your scores and how great your kids are testing when you've kicked out every one of them that would have been a problem and made them go back to their zone school. I believe that if you want to have a charter school and you take on a child, you own that child until that child matriculates out of your school. That's the same thing with our public school teachers. If they could pick and choose what child they wanted and ship off the ones that had behavioral problems or those that weren't learning quite up to speed as the rest of the class, that would be ideal. Our charter schools have to adhere by the same rules as everyone else, and especially for the for-profit charters. A lot of these waivers that they're asking for are business decisions just to make shareholders a little bit more profitable, and we got to call it for what it is. So yes, our system is broken, and we're pitting charter schools against public schools as if with a false equivalency. So I get a little heated on that one, but no, I do not support the current system, and we need to hold charter schools to account.
Okay, thank you. And we are going to now give you a little bit more time than we had planned for your closing. And so I'm going to give you your chance to make a closing statement, speak to our members why they should vote for you for Lieutenant Governor. And as a little extra ask, tell us what you would change in Georgia politics to make it better for all of us. And we are going to start with Mr. Bailey.
Well, thank you again, Lisa, and to GAE membership for having us, the ability to speak with you this evening. Let me say again, I appreciate what all of you do. What you do is a public service, and yeah, you get a salary for it, but that doesn't mean it's not public service. So thank you for what you do. I am I'll say I'm a proven statewide nominee. I've run a tough race in a general election across this state. The National Republicans spent $3.3 million to beat me. And I ran against an incumbent, and I was endorsed by GAE in that race. So y'all are along for that trip, and got 49% of the vote. I know what it takes to run statewide. I have a perspective of somebody from outside of Atlanta. I grew up in rural West Georgia. And so I bring that perspective because, half our state is metro Atlanta, and I live in metro Atlanta now. Half of it is outside, and bringing that perspective, I think, is a needed one. And my public service in public safety. As a senior assistant district attorney, worked on combating organized crime. I've sat in the living rooms of the victims of the violence that swirls around narcotics trafficking and illegal arms trafficking. And I've sat in the living rooms of some of the families of the defendants I am prosecuting, and they're just as broken. And all those issues bleed into to education. But my perspective as someone that's worked in public safety in the criminal justice system, I think is a needed one at Lieutenant Governor to finally, we talk about put our money where our mouth is in terms of public safety, and providing a system that does provide that equal safety and equal justice. I think in our politics, we need a lot more understanding and a lot more love, a lot more consideration. I think the golden rule is probably aptly named. We could use a lot of that in our politics. I will say again, I am a proud Democrat. This ain't a pox on both your houses. We are not acting the way the Republicans are. So truly, they need it more than we do. But if we can all embrace it, I think that would be great for our politics and for our citizenry. I'll close with this. I'm proud to be endorsed by Congressman Hank Johnson and Congresswoman Lucy McBath, former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin, the last Democratic Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor. And I ask you to stand with me in this election. And I promise you, you'll never have to apologize. And you will always know my friend, Charlie Bailey, he fights for us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative Shannon.
Well, thank you, GAE, so much for having us here tonight. Georgia's inherent value is its people, but we are losing a lot of our inherent value, and it's simply because of our refusal to expand Medicaid fully, our refusal to end mass incarceration in the state, our refusal to protect voting rights, and our refusal to pay workers a livable wage, and last but not least, our refusal to invest in education. So if you ask me what I would change about Georgia politics, I would say that Georgia needs to get serious about investing in Georgians, and that absolutely includes investing in teachers as a priority. The state often talks a lot about being the best to do business, and while that's great, we need to talk about what it's like to actually live here. The state needs to get serious about investing in Georgians. I am proud to be on the GAE honor roll. These issues mean a lot to me. As I mentioned before, it's one of the reasons that I ran for public office. I have consistently stood with you. I am the policy heavyweight in this race because I am somebody who knows the issues inside and out, and I don't stop until we can find resolution on, I don't stop until we can find resolution on what it is that we need to do. So I'm asking you to put your trust in me. Other organizations have decided to put their trust in me. The organizations that you trust me to fight for you. I've been endorsed by Working Families Party, SEIU, New Georgia Project PAC, Georgia Equality, and a host of other advocacy organizations, because they know that I am somebody who is serious about doing the work and making a difference. You can go to RanitaShannon.com. That's my website, Ranita Shannon, running for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have next, Representative Allen.
Well, thank you, Lisa, and thank you, GAE, for having us tonight. I know it's been a long day. You guys have been in the classroom all day, and now you have to come listen to a bunch of politicians just talk about a coming election. But we're glad you did it, and we hope you are getting the information you need to make a choice. What I'll say is, I've been doing the work. Since being in office, have been a GAE honor roll recipient. I've been not only an ally to teachers, but I've often sought out Lisa and John, everybody else out in the Hall of Grace, and everybody out in the hall to talk about issues before they come up for a vote or they're coming up in committee. And I think that's the partnership that you're looking for in Lieutenant Governor. One who will admit what I don't know, but will seek you out to learn the things that I need to learn about what's going on. So the other pieces I'll say is I'm the only one in this race who has flipped a seat from an incumbent Republican. And when I flip the seat from a 20-year incumbent Republican, that's exactly what we need to do now, is flip the Lieutenant Governor's seat from a 20-year stronghold of Republicans. I also have a perfect rating with the Georgia NAACP, with Georgia Conservation Voters, and was the 2021 Mental Health Consumer Network Legislator of the Year. I'm very proud of my record. I stand on my record. And the most important endorsement that I have is the 27,000 voters who sent me back in a re-election campaign because they trusted the work that I did in the community and the voice that I represented for them under the Gold Dome. The second part of the question of what will I do different, one of the things I talk about in my small settings as I campaign is running for Lieutenant Governor is my pet project. And what I mean by that is PET, policy, empathy, and tone. That's what we're going to need in order to change the direction of our state. With policy, we need to put policy over politics. Those are two distinctly different things. We need to have empathy and make sure that the person is at the center of every single decision that we make. And then we've got to change the tone. The tone of politics right now has gotten out of control. And I laugh when Charlie said it's not a pox on both your houses. He's absolutely right. But in order to solve the problem, we have to show that we are ready to lead and legislate using a tone that is collaborative and productive and ends with the best result for all of Georgians. So yes, this is my pet project, running for Lieutenant Governor. I hope that you have heard what you needed to hear in order to make your decisions. And I hope that that decision is to vote for Eric Allen, either today or tomorrow or on May 24th to be your next Lieutenant Governor. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Hayes.
Thank you. What I would change about all this is to give you a voice. All of you, you wake up every day, you're going to the job that you wanted to do to help young people. You're advocating for young children, you're advocating for children who are mainstream, you're advocating for children who are in special education. It's my job to make your job better and easier, and not just addressing education. I must address economic growth in the communities for the young people where they come from, not only in the urban setting, but also the rural setting. I must address healthcare to make sure that their parents and also the children have access to adequate health insurance, and also the doctors to provide the care for them. I also must make sure that voter access and voter protections are there. So when we talk about education, again, I mentioned before, it's not just one silo, it's looking at everything. We've got to make sure that your job is still deemed a profession. And we also must make sure that when I am elected, that you will have a guarantee that I will be an ethical professional that I am. And everything that I do and say is of record, but it's also a truthful record. So you can have a guarantee from me that when I'm advocating for you to have a voice, that we're all advocating for children. And I will be thinking about my grandparents, educators. I'll be thinking about my brother who was in special education, thinking about myself who was in special education as well. On the gifted side, my brother learned disabled. So we must make sure that we're inclusive of all people, all children, and make sure we give you a voice. At the end of the day, I want to give you that blank canvas. So please learn about me, www.jasonhayes4forga.com, and please vote Dr. Jason Hayes, your next Lieutenant Governor. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here with us this evening. And for our members that are watching, we will have another forum next week with 4 more candidates for Lieutenant Governor. We want to thank you all for your support of public education over the years and for being here tonight so our members can hear directly from you. And we will be back next week at 6:30 with another session. And we will also have information then for our members about action we will be taking during the second 2 weeks of May concerning GPO WEP, Social Security, and our fight at the federal level to change those laws. So thank you all for joining us this evening, and we will see you next week for our next edition of Facebook Live.
Thank you, Lisa.